started. We're right on the hour here. And I'm very excited to welcome a series of excellent, esteemed panelists, but I want to open it up to the group to discuss what introduce what we're going to be talking about, and give you a run through of some Active Minds content that we have current right now. So communicating in quarantine, tips to encourage mental wellness in close quarters is the theme of our webinar today. This is rooted in, we've been hearing for the past week or so that this has been a really pervasive, important topic of conversation as folks change their living situations, their work situations, their school settings. Folks are kind of dealing with stuff that's maybe new, and that's all on top of the circumstances that we're living in right now, which are just wildly unprecedented. So we want to just, at Active Minds, create the space to have these conversations and to hear from folks who you may relate with on different levels, and hear what their experiences have been. I want to cover a tiny bit of housekeeping really quick. If you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A box. Hopefully you all can see that there's a Q&A box on your screen. You can direct questions to all the panelists, to me as Active Minds staff. By the way, I'm Becky Fine. I'm the Director of Training and Engagement with Active Minds. I'm based in Santa Rosa, California, and am happy to answer any questions about what Active Minds is up to and what kinds of things we have happening through our organization. A note that this session is being recorded, and we're going to use that for later dissemination. I'm actually going to start that off. I've got a colleague recording, but I'm going to double check it and make sure it's going. Okay. And then lastly, I want to draw your attention to Active Minds evolving online COVID-19 resource hub. So that's activeminds.org/remote resources. I definitely want to make sure that you all know about that. That's a website that the Active Minds staff is responding to, and is consistently evolving based on what we're hearing is needed at the time. We're creating a lot of new blog posts and information that you can access. So we want to make sure you all have that on your list of resources. Quickly, before we get started, I want to try out a poll real quick, just hear a little bit about who we have in the room right now. So I'm going to launch a poll. If you could all take a second to answer that. Hopefully you can see it. So we want to know who's in the room right now. What best describes you? So let's see. Answers are rolling in. It's fun to see how fast it happens. Can you all see that, Perry and Zuhair and Michael? Yeah. Okay.
We can't see it, but we can't answer either. We're not allowed to vote.
So it's just up.
Yeah, I can see it as well.
Yeah, great. So, all right, we've got about 215 responses. I'm gonna go ahead and close it there and share the results. All right. It looks like the majority of the people in the room are indeed students, which is always exciting, and we know that from Active Minds. We've got a lot of faculty and staff in the room, some campus administrators, some nonprofit representatives, some mental health professionals, parents, community members. Yeah, and so I'm excited to have that information, particularly for our panelists, so they know who they're speaking to when their turns come up. So thanks everybody for getting involved with that. Close that out. A quick introduction to our panel. So we've got Zuhair Ibrahim, who is a graduating senior and an Active Minds chapter leader at Pace University in New York City. We'll be hearing from her in a few minutes. We've got Perry Chen, who's a personal counselor and an Active Minds chapter advisor at Skyline College based in San Bruno, California, but I think currently closer to in San Francisco, California, since campus is closed. And then Michael Helmick, who's a program manager with the California Mental Health Services Authority, also called CalMESA. So among these three, we have some really diverse perspectives and experiences represented, and we're excited to those voices in a few minutes here. So I want to, one thing that's been showing up a lot for us in the active minds sphere, and a conversation we've been having a lot of, is how easy it can be sometimes in the face of such intense confusion and ambiguity and different kinds of disappointments and frustrations to invalidate ourselves or potentially compare ourselves to other people that are having different experiences. And so at Active Minds, it's really brought up our VAR resource in our own minds. And so I want to run through that with you all before I turn it over to our panelists. The heart of VAR, I want you all to kind of keep in mind that it's not about being an expert to help, and we can't keep that. We have to keep that in mind more than ever right now in the face of such uncertainty. It's about being there. And the thing about what we're facing right now is that being there looks really different than maybe it does in other times. So I want to walk you, validate, appreciate, refer, access that Active Minds promote and support. So first, we talk about validating their feelings and experiences. And before I actually dive too far into this, I always like to share that VAR was actually created by Active Minds students. A few years ago, it's the chapter at UCLA. They were frequently approached by because they had their table out and they said, we're mental health advocates, and people would say, oh, great, I'm so glad to have found you. I'm feeling really stressed out or really overwhelmed. And these students, they'd say, well, we don't want to say the wrong thing. We're afraid we're going to direct them to the wrong place or something like that. So they created this memorable tool called VAR, and they would actually keep a little cheat sheet for themselves on their table. So they'd keep it, and it would be basically this: VAR sounds like, and they would take themselves through these steps. And then they approached Active Minds National about a year later and said, does this seem like something that you all would want to promote on a national scale? And we, of course, absolutely wanted to, and have found since then it is one of the most popular campaigns Active Minds has seen in a long time. So the V is about validation, validate their feelings and experiences. So what that sounds like that sounds really difficult. Let's start there. That makes sense. I'm sorry you're going through that right now. What you're going through is real and it's valid. That sounds really overwhelming. It's okay to be confused or frustrated or disappointed in the face of all of this. And this is a really important first step. And I wish I could see all of you out there, but I'd like to just invite you all to take a second to really think about a time that you felt very validated by someone, you felt heard by someone. Instead of jumping to trying to solve a problem, they listened to you and they validated your experience. And so in kind of in-person presentations of this, the things that I hear from people that they think of when they remember that experience is really relief and gratitude and being seen and being heard. And I know for me, as someone, my personal style tends to be one that wants to solve the problem. Okay, I hear you. You're struggling. Let me find a solution for you. Let's get through this. But a lot of times, I'd say most times, folks first need to hear a validation, and so that's going to look a little different for different people. But here are some tools that we shifted actually a little bit to respond to what we're talking about right now, which is validation in the face of such an unprecedented and scary and challenging time that we're all in right now. So the A stands for appreciate their courage. It's really important. We want people to know that it was a good idea, that they spoke out, that they were right to share, and that it's a safe space for them. So that can sound like it can be really hard to find the words with everything going on these days. I'm really glad you shared. Thanks for saying so. It helps to know what you're going through. I appreciate that you shared. Staying open about our feelings will help us get through this as we proceed. So that again sounds different for different people, but it's really valuable to try and keep that conversation open, keep the communication open as we're interacting with colleagues in a different way. Maybe we're even closed off from colleagues entirely. Maybe we're closed off from classmates entirely. Family, a lot of us are living with our families in ways that, or our significant others or our roommates in more intensive situations that we have before. And I think about folks who live by themselves and what unique challenges that might bring up. So all of those are really important and valid. And lastly, refer them to skills and support. And this one is going to look really different in this current time. So what do you do for self-care? You'll notice that a lot of the refer them to skills and support are going to be question-based. So what do you do for self-care is a really important one. Do you know about the crisis text line or National Suicide Prevention Lifeline in case they're really struggling? How about some fresh air? I think really supporting people in getting outside as much as possible, but recognizing that might not be what everybody needs. So again, question-based, making sure that when I'm going to refer somebody to skills and support, it's not what would work for me. It's about figuring out what works for them. And Active Minds is really unique in including that skills part, because we really believe that for some folks, a lot of folks, professional support is going to be what they need. And for a lot of folks, it's self-care and healthy coping and social connection is going to be what they need in that moment. So another one, I've been using this meditation or fitness app. Does that sound helpful to you? And I'm learning every day about how more and more of them are free right now. A lot of the meditation apps or fitness apps which are typically behind, can be kind of expensive even, are actually free right now. So that's something that's worth checking out. And then most importantly, what would be helpful for you in this moment? What would be helpful for you in this moment is something that I really ground on and think is really critical in the VAR process. And keeping in mind that never before in our lifetimes have we experienced something that's so truly global in this way. I hope we never do again, in a way that looks like this, that's rooted in such a challenge, and recognizing that this is that we are truly all going through this together, even though my challenges and frustrations and grief is different and rooted in different experiences than yours. We're all in it together. And what we're hearing from students, we had a webinar last night with students, and somebody posed the question, so what do young adults need to hear right now? And I was so struck by the resounding response to it, which is that it's going to be okay. We don't know when, we don't know where, and it's okay to be confused and scared about that uncertainty, but it's going to be okay. And we're a community, and we're building this, and we're building camaraderie around that. Another thing we heard from students is supporting them by promoting accurate information. There's so much inaccurate information, and for folks in the room who have platforms to embrace, to use them to share what is the accurate information out there, what's really going on, and also to use our platforms to share hope and to share messages that aren't related to the virus and aren't scary and overwhelming all the time right now. So patience and validation are critical in a way, more so than is even typical of our communication. So a couple things to be sure to avoid when we're talking about validation, when we're talking about VAR, is trying to fix the issue or rush to a solution before we've sufficiently validated the experience. And I say that to myself as much as everybody else. Again, my instinct is always like, okay, let me help fix it. It's like, wait, no, I don't know that fixing is what they need right now, and I don't necessarily know what the fix is going to be. So it's first about validation and learning from them about what that's going to look like. Using our own experiences to relate before hearing out others, and so that one's tricky, especially right now. It's like, it can be very easy to slip into a like, well, you think that's bad, let me tell you about what I'm going through, that kind of thing, which what you're going through is very, very important too, and you deserve the space, and you're worthy of being validated and heard out as well, and that's super important. But starting with validating and hearing out what they're going through is a critical experience around promoting positive, productive communication. And then we've kind of touched on this already, but avoiding saying that it's not that bad. That like, well, wait, at least at least this isn't happening, or at least this isn't what you're going through. So we want to avoid minimizing or invalidating what someone else is experiencing in that moment. So that's VAR. Yeah, we really want to invite you to engage with that content on our website, and to reach out if you'd like to learn some more. But I'd like to take the opportunity to bring in our first panelists. So Zuhair, I'm gonna introduce Zuhair. Zuhair Ibrahim is a senior at Pace University's New York City campus and the current president of their Active Minds chapter. She actually was the person who created the Active Minds chapter on her campus in her junior year, and was the vice president at the time. She's particularly passionate about mental health, access to education, sexual assault, and criminal justice reform. So I'm going to turn it over to Zuhair.
Hi, everybody. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Cool. Okay, so I'm just gonna focus on the themes of learning, graduation, post-grad life, just like the academic sphere in its whole, and then like the college community and what's that looking like. So every student's experience is going to be different in this instance, but the thing that I will say that I will note like early on in this is that I go to a small school, well, medium-sized school in the middle of New York. Actually in the city. So I go to Pace, as Becky said. My average class size would be around 30, and the school size in itself for the one campus out of the 3 that we have is 8,000 plus students. So we're all deeply impacted by what's happened. So I will say, in terms of like learning, I worked as a TA last semester, and it was an online class and it was a lot. But I can't imagine what professors are going through right now, trying to navigate an entirely different way of learning. If like, especially I have my thesis advisor is older, doesn't understand how to use Zoom. So I can't imagine what professors are going through right now. So shout out to the professors. But yeah, so learning, this is an adjustment for all of us to what we're used to. I have people in my life who don't like online classes at all because they will forget assignments. It's not a common way in which they can handle a class load. And I have other friends who have only online classes. So for this is already didn't impact them. But I will say, personally, I have a schedule where I like things to be very in its time frame, and that's how I'm used to. So this has kind of like taken me for a whiplash in some sense. And I don't have any structure anymore because of what's happened. And I'm still trying to figure out a way of navigating back to my old structure. So I think one thing I will say is, as a piece of, I guess, advice or some sense, is that like stick to what you had, so that things don't feel like it's changing gravely, even though they are, because that's the best way in which maintaining a sense of like our new normal. And we're all in a space that isn't familiar to us, to students that were dorming that had to go home, and had to now learn how to study in their bedroom, versus studying in their dorm room or their library, or what resources they had on campus. And to students that are commuters as myself, I very much was staying in the library late night and then going home. So having to be at home at all times, when I was in the house, I would say maybe 6 hours a day maximum, is very different for me. And I think, as I said prior, like learning how to navigate the regular schedule that you had. So if you woke up at 8 before all this happened, continue to wake up at 8. Don't sleep in if you don't need to. I think a lot of people are feeling a slump, myself included, and I think it's exhausting. And I think if you had a way in which you were handling things prior, that's the best way to navigate this. And I think this goes on to discuss like the importance of equity and resources, and what we had on campus prior, and learning how to navigate that in our homes now, because that's, I'm sure, are all schools across the country online except Liberty? I would say majority of them, right? Yeah.
Many schools are online at this point, yeah.
Yeah. So I would say people need resources to succeed. So I think figuring out what your school offers is a very big part of this. So if your school has an online counseling center, if the library is online now and they're having a Q&A from the hours that it was originally open, I don't know, student activities department, all those resources that you were using in your day-to-day that have now been impacted and taken away from you physically doesn't mean virtually it's not available. So seeing what emails were sent to you, seeing what the university is posting on Instagram or Twitter or what may have it be, and figuring out what's the best way to handle your course of learning in the next 6 to 8 weeks that you have left of the spring semester, is the best way to go for this. And I will say, as a graduating senior, so my graduation was moved, and I think from what I've been hearing, a lot of students that are graduating, this is like a loss. This is like ripped away from us, especially being first gen. It's really impactful. So I think like there's a big sense of like feeling disappointed, and heartache. And I think I heard her campus might do like a virtual graduation. So seeing what options your schools are doing, I think a virtual a graduation may not make some people happy, but at least it's a graduation that's happening. And figuring out like, can you rally around your school and say, hey, like, we want to do graduation. Is it possible to do it in the first weeks of the next fall semester? And just outreach to your school, I think, is really important. I think a lot of these schools are trying to figure out the best solution, but I think a lot of it is just like committee meeting. So they're trying to wrap around all this new information while trying to provide students the best resources possible, because it's a change for everyone in these departments, not just us. So yeah. And for post-grad life, I think going into a job market in the middle of a recession is never fun. Perry's face says it all. But I guess I'm hopeful in some sense that things will change, but I think there's a looming sense of uncertainty with that. So I think reaching out to your career services would be the best bet, and seeing what options they have and what sources they have. My school has Handshake, and on Handshake there's multiple job opportunities. Maybe if you're a perfect candidate for this, they may recommend you. And just seeing like maybe if a summer internship is open, because like I know some summer internships have now closed, but I'm not sure about all of them. But I would say navigate as you would prior to all of this, because you cannot let this take away from any opportunities that you had, and it shouldn't do that to you anyway. And overall, I would say the college community, people are confused, lost, hurt. I think Becky hit it all in the beginning. So reaching out, if you're Active Minds chapter president, reaching out to members, take a poll, see how people are. If you have an activities department on your campus, seeing what they're doing in terms of like supporting you going virtual, doing your meetings through Zoom. I've seen some chapters already going virtual without like even worrying about connecting with their activities department. There's a lot of money being lost by student employees. People are just overall just like, what's happening to me? And I think one thing that we can all pick up from this is that, like, as Becky said, this is global, and schools are trying to do the best they can, and schools have plans set for natural disasters, but nothing like this. And so I think talk to your chapter, see what they're doing. We were supposed to have the Out of the Darkness walk, and that's not happening anymore. So my advisor, who I just met with 2 hours ago, suggested doing an online fundraiser, and potentially having mental health first aid training online for 8 hours. I don't know how that would work. But but figuring out interactive ways of connecting with people, collabing with orgs, do a face mask on Zoom. What's it gonna hurt, you know? I mean, little things like that, I think in this instant, I think would be calming, would bring back a little sense of normality in what we had prior. But I think this shouldn't stop you from being successful in any goals that you had before. And well wishes, and that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Zuhair. It's really great to hear your voice in this and to hear from the student perspective, particularly a graduating student. I know the class of 2020 has such a unique set of circumstances ahead of them, and I appreciate that you shared your voice on that. Next up, we've got Perry Chen, who I'm excited to welcome to the panel. Perry Chen is the full-time personal counselor and Active Minds faculty advisor at Skyline College in San Bruno. As a California native, he earned his master's in social work at Columbia University in New York City. So we've got another New York City connection here. And worked primarily as a licensed clinical social worker doing mental health therapy in New York City, Beijing, and San Francisco, and now in San Bruno. While his focus has been on youth and young adults, he has worked with a variety of populations and issues. I mean, he resides in a suburb outside of San Francisco with his wife and 21-month-old sons.
And actually, today is his 21-month-year-old birthday, so yay!
Oh, sweet. I'm going to stop sharing so Perry can share his side.
Excellent. Thank you. I will take over here. I'll just move this over. All right, everybody. Let's see. All right. I'm sharing, right? You all can see that. All right. So I'm just going to really focus on sort of how I've been coping, and then some tools and tips which may be useful for you all. And thank you for doing that poll earlier. It was really great just to see who's in the room. So I guess I've been thinking about how this has been impacting me in terms of my work. So as a mental health professional on a campus, we really face-to-face is really sort of the gold standard, and that is not an option at this point. I'm in San Mateo County, which is in shelter-in-place as in effect, and so our campus is effectively closed, but our classes have gone online. So we've moved to doing phone sessions, which is sort of the and even with the sort of and there's going to be Q&A on this probably, but HIPAA has been sort of lifting some of the restrictions or sort of enforcement around teleconferencing and video conferencing. So we're looking into some of the options, not so much as how do we react in this situation, but looking beyond the coronavirus, and once life gets back to normal, what would telehealth look like for us? So we're really looking at that, and that's really impacted our work. We really do think about our clients and their privacy, so that's why we've decided to go with phones through consultation with CAMPT and other organizations. So well, how else has this impacted my work? I think one thing that's been really helpful, and thank goodness for technology, Zoom has been really amazing, and doing video meetings has been really helpful, but for a very specific reason. As I've been meeting with people, I've been having meetings with my colleagues, and there's been a lot of, oh, can you hear me? Or, hey, can you see me? And what this reminds me is that we're all in this sort of transition period, and we're all in this together. We're all trying to figure this out together. And there's been so much grace, and there's been so much good intentions and thoughtfulness, and people are just being really nice to each other, assuming the best intentions. I've seen cats on keyboards. I've seen, I've heard children in the background. You might hear my 21-month-year-old. He might toddle in later. And just really this great reminder that, you know what, we're all human, and we're all trying to get through this together. We've been doing check-ins with so normally at the office, my colleagues and I, we check in with each other very informally. And this morning, my colleague gave me a call and was like, hey, what's up? Is everything okay? She says, oh yeah, I'm just doing a morning check-in. And it occurred to me, kind of like what Zuhair said, how do we keep doing the things that we normally do to take care of ourselves? And so her and I just checked in about what's going to happen for the day, and it was just a nice way to just connect. The impacts on home, it's been great. I guess I'm with a 21-month-year-old. I'm kind of used to being home, can't go out at nighttime, but the loss of friend contact has been kind of difficult. We can't see friends in the same way, but Zoom meetings again have been really helpful. We've become kind of pros at this, organizing social gatherings. We did like a game night actually on Zoom. We were using Jackbox, if any of you are familiar. We did a screen share and you could play the games on your phone. I don't know if I'm supposed to be promoting products or not. I'm not promoting anything, just saying that's what we used. It was great. We've been using Zoom to get the grandparents to sort of virtually play with my son. So they'll get like, toys and pinwheels and spin it in front of the computer so he can kind of interact with them. And not having a commute has been really nice. We actually had lunch together today, and that was just been really great. But the impact on home has really, and Zuhair was sort of mentioning this, there's been a really big impact on what I'll call sort of time and space expectations. I'm really thankful because my wife is home and she's able to provide childcare, but things have been really difficult. You might notice I'm wearing this is what I usually wear at work. The first day that we're doing work from home, I'm not used to working from home. I was wearing PJs. I was like, cool, and it was a mess for me. I couldn't separate between work and home, and everything kind of blended together, and it was just messy for me sort of mentally. And so after that, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to wake up at the time I normally do. I'm going to dress the way I normally dress. And we were able to create a space for me to work with my little workspace. And I want to also encourage you to create that kind of space. The most private space in our space here is the bedroom. I'm not in the bedroom though, because for me at least, that would create an association that would be really difficult. And I realize for many of our people listening online, there is no choice other than the bedroom. And what I might suggest is perhaps segment maybe a certain corner or something, not necessarily on your bed, if that's at all possible. So you could have that separation between sleep and maybe where you're working or where you're studying. But yeah, I try to keep my day similar to how I'm going to the office, to sort of keep some sense of routine or structure. And speaking of, my son is unmerciful. He has a routine. He wakes up at between 5:30 and 6 a.m. and you can't argue with him. So it's been it's been a blessing because he's kept us, he's kept me on this routine. And what I've found is it's really good to have some routine, so you have some certainty within these uncertain times. I was speaking with one of my student assistants yesterday, and she was talking about this pull to stay in bed, of just being unmotivated. I don't have to go to class, I don't have to go to work, and it's just it's easy to just stay in bed. And it's really important, again, to create sort of structure and boundaries for yourself, because again, things can just get so blended together that it's hard to keep track of anything. Even time, for me, time has felt like it's blended. It's hard to remember what day it is, but having structure can help with that. Structure could be setting alarms of when you wake up or when you go to sleep, where you work, what space you work in, where you're going to be doing your school stuff, where you'll be doing your meal times, all these sort of things. And that's not to say we shouldn't have room for spontaneity. That spontaneity is really important, but structure and boundaries can provide that subtle comfort of certainty, again, especially during these uncertain times. I'm going to run through a few quick practical tips. And these are just some simple ones. There's so many, and there's so many great resources. Active Minds has some incredible resources that we've been sharing at our school about how to sort of maintain mental wellness. And also they have a great article on how to do work from home. And so I encourage you to go there and read that. But the first tip I want to talk about is practice tuning in. Tuning in how you're doing both emotionally and physically. This can modulate how we react to other people, so we can sort of wisely react. People, I could throw out the word mindfulness, but practice tuning in and saying, how am I right now? How am I feeling? There's a lot of news everywhere you turn about the coronavirus. And so for some of us, I would encourage to limit your news exposure and create what's called a worry window, where you designate a certain amount of time to look at news and to worry. We've acknowledged the worries, but we don't want to get consumed by things. So whether for you it's 15 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours, whatever it means for you, it may be beneficial to limit your news exposure. Connections are so important right now. This is a shared experience, and this is a great opportunity for us to connect with people we haven't spoken with in a long time, because this is something we can all connect to. But having connections is really important. Just because we're physically disconnected doesn't mean we have to be emotionally disconnected. I also want to speak to some of our high school students who might be online. This can be an especially difficult time because you're not doing a lot of the school activities you would normally do, prom, uh, school gatherings, assemblies, these sort of things. And so when you do meet with some of your friends online, there may not be as much to talk about, and that could be a little awkward. And this suggestion is going to sound kind of corny, but those icebreaker questions like, if you were stuck on a desert island, what 3 things would you bring? Bringing these things to your groups of friends so that it does generate conversation. Otherwise, it can feel a little awkward because it doesn't feel like there's a shared topic beyond the coronavirus. And let's face it, sometimes we can get tired of talking about that as well. And I just want to reinforce again, that's really important for us to be looking at structure and routine to create some sort of certainty in these times of uncertainty. So I hope that that's helpful, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions. And I'm just really grateful to be able to share a little bit with you all.
Thank you so much, Barry. It's really good to hear your voice and your perspective, and love hearing a little bit of your kid in the background.
Oh, you can hear him. Okay, oops, I wasn't sure.
in the Q&A, we got a happy birthday from from an audience member.
Oh, thank you.
Perry, we had one person wondering if you would be willing to share out, and you can send that to me, and we can send it to the members or the audience here, about the HIPAA changes you mentioned. Is there a link you can send?
Oh boy. So what I will say to that is make sure, and I'm actually not up to date on all this as well either, so I don't want to necessarily give the wrong advice. But one of the things you really want to check in on is what your state is doing, because there's some federal things that have been sort of said, but make sure whatever state you're in, check on that. So I don't have those resources right now, and I don't want to, it's basically just Googling. So sorry.
That makes perfect sense. I'm sure it's a little bit different in different places. So we've got some really great questions coming in that we'll answer at the end here, but feel free to keep them coming if you've got questions. Submit them to the Q&A, and we'll address as many as we can at the end of the presentation. So I'm excited to welcome, last but not least, Michael Helmick. And I was on a call. Michael's a program manager for the California Mental Health Services Authority, which is Cal Mesa, and we had a team call last week, and I was very struck by how he's had to adapt creatively to upkeep his work life in a remote setting, as a parent of 2 young kids and someone who typically works in an office setting. And that's been really shaken up, and you'll be able to see that in his background here. In his role as a program manager, he leads Cal Mesa's prevention and early intervention programs, of which Active Minds is partnered. Michael brings extensive experience in the legislative and mental health space, with particular interest in efforts to reduce disparities for California's underserved, inappropriately served, and underserved or unserved communities. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, good. I had some technical difficulties earlier, which, as you can see, is probably due to my unique work office. So again, Michael Helmick from Cal Mesa, the California Mental Health Services Authority. We are based here in Sacramento, but we do represent our members, which are the counties and cities behavioral health departments in California. There are 58 departments, so 58 different needs. As Becky mentioned, and thank you all for inviting me to speak. Becky in Active Minds is one of our partners on our prevention and early intervention work. So California is uniquely lucky that we have a 1% tax on income above $1 million that funds mental health services. And a portion of that goes to prevention and early intervention, which for me, coming from working with a lot of the diverse underserved communities is really ideal for those communities. So I appreciate working with Active Minds and all of our partners, and even starting Thank you. I think Perry could have done the parent intro or conversation for us, but I'll jump in. So I have who I euphemistically call my coworkers. I have 3 coworkers. 2 of them are children. My wife, who we are really lucky, and just an opportune time where she actually just took time off of work to look at new opportunities. So she's actually able to be at home. So before I even start, I have a very unique opportunity where she's able to be at home and be with the kids, and that allows me to go to my remote office, which is my garage. I have a 3.5-year-old Emma and a 17-month-old Nolan. So we have our hands full. They definitely do not like or allow me to work at in my actual house, and so I've tried in other times. We did try even this time, the first day, and I think for everyone was a bit of a learning experience, but it did not go as planned. They didn't exactly enjoy Dad going off and to the other room, and so what we've actually changed is part of our schedule, which I'll touch on, is Dad goes to work. So I give them a kiss and I give them a hug and say goodbye like I normally do, and then I slip out the garage door. Depend on where they are, maybe I'll even open the garage door, really sell it home. So I'll just go to work. One of the things that we found really helpful that we didn't do for the first couple days is we created a very structured schedule, which is helpful not only for the children, but more so for the parents. And so my wife and I were both having that time space gap where we didn't even know what time it was and when are we going to get to lunch and nap and all of that. And so setting the schedule and really getting up on the same time with which, as Perry mentioned, my son does not let me sleep in. So we get started at 5:30 every morning with family breakfast. We do our chores and shower, brush teeth, and all of that. And we always try to in the morning do a little walk, get the kids out. So to the fresh air, getting out, and just stretching your legs. So we're not just staying in the house, turning on the TV in the morning. And so really just starting that structure. My kids aren't in school yet. They are in daycare, which is closed officially now. But since my wife's been off, we have not had them in, luckily. So the schedule has been a little bit interesting, but so working in the garage here in Sacramento, it's a little bit cold. So I have commandeered our SUV, and I've actually set up a little home office in the back of my SUV. So it is really just looking for any opportunity to get the work done. And then one of the things that's been really interesting for me is that we've had so many calls. So this is really the busiest time for Cal Mesa and all of our program partners. We ramp up for May is Mental Health Month here in California. We do a huge effort. Active Minds, as many of you probably know, we've had to postpone the, and I'm blanking on it since I'm on camera, the Sin Silence Packing exhibit, which for me has been so moving. I've been able to attend a few of them. So it's really impacted all of our work. And so it's been a lot of figuring out how to pivot. So it's been a lot of calls. The first week, I found that there was a drop in the number of emails. This week, unfortunately or fortunately, it's rebounded. But so I've seen a bit of an increase in the emails too, and along with the calls, and so that's been a bit of a learning experience. I'm used to being in the office and being able to connect with our staff on one-on-one basis whenever's needed. Since they're right down the office, I can kind of just yell at them. So that's been a bit of a probably the biggest learning curve is how to still get the work that I need to get done to keep the programs moving, but also staying connected. we have hired new staff, and trying to bring them on at this time has been interesting. So we have folks that are 2 weeks in, who aren't really experts in Mental Health Services Act and mental health services, but they have the ability. And so it's how to manage them and help them and support them in those efforts, but also still trying to get all the work that our members need has been a really interesting learning experience. And one of the things that I found sort of interesting is a lot of the calls, and I think, Perry, when you your kids started talking, I was thinking of the BBC article where the kid ran in during the professor's interview, and I feel like that was just about my first couple days where the kids were jumping in every time. So it's been a learning experience. Definitely one of the things that we've tried to do is do a lot of FaceTime with the grandparents and the aunts and the cousins who our kids get to see really frequently. And so that's been a drop. And with young kids, they can't really verbalize that they're missing their friends, but that's one of the things that we're noticing is our daughter is starting to ask more about where are her friends? Why can't she go see her friends? Why can't she go to the park with her friends? And so working on that and doing FaceTimes with her friends, and getting outside has been really helpful for us, in addition to the schedule, not only work schedule, but also for the family and life schedule. So, and then scheduling time to actually eat, which has been sort of unique in this. And I guess I could bring food to my garage, but I do come back in for a visit and then help out with a nap. And so it's been a learning experience. And I think part of it is knowing that it's the same. The next day is not going to be the same, but there's still a bit of a Groundhog's Day of repetitiveness, but every day's new. And so taking each day as it is, and trying to just connect and take this really unique opportunity to spend a lot of time with my kids and my wife, and also connect in a different way. So I'm learning some new opportunities to work at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing,
Thank
Michael.
you.
I think it's so interesting and important to kind of see. I appreciate video for this reason. We kind of get this little glimpse into what does everybody's life look like right now, and how are people making this work, and where are you functioning from? So I appreciate you sharing, all of you sharing your experiences. We have some really great questions in the docket here, and the first one I want to address, we had a couple questions about VAR and how to appropriately share our experience after someone else has shared their experience. I think that's a really interesting question as far as communication tools are concerned. And so I want to kind of say to that, in terms of the conversation and a conversation flow, what it's really about, what VAR really encompasses, is kind of first starting with validating their experiences and appreciating their experiences, and then absolutely embracing, using the opportunity to relate in an empathetic way. I think can be really effective in that moment, as long as we're avoiding the one-upping or comparison. I think that's really what it's about. But sharing our own experiences is really, really important.
Can I jump real quick and add to that as well? That's a great response. Is that all right, Becky?
Yeah, please do, Perry.
Yeah, I just want to say, thank you for that question. And one thing you can do too is to ask somebody and say, after you've listened and validated, to ask, would it be right if can I share with you sort of, my story? It's not the same as yours, but maybe there's something we can learn from it, and then see where they go from there. And that'll give, open the doors in some way.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for adding that. I think that's so important. That kind of that consent component of sharing is really, really valuable. We had one person comment that they found having a half an hour coffee time virtually with their coworkers to start off their day has been really supportive in kind of getting the day launched on a positive note. I want to pose a question to Zuhair, for someone who is, it looks like they are very interested in building an Active Minds chapter. Looks like you saw that question, Zuhair, in the docket here. What are some pieces of advice that you would offer to somebody who's launching a chapter?
Some pieces of advice. That was 2 years ago. My God. Some pieces of advice I'd give to a starting chapter would be to work on networking on campus. So work with your SGA, work with your activities department. If you can get in with administration, and having their support will be your biggest allies, especially in your first year, trying to navigate the way in which to like run the org. And seeing if you can talk to the counseling center and seeing if they will have your support. I think having the counseling center support our first year was a really big reason why we did so well. And then I also will say, have a team. Like the biggest, and I think probably the biggest reason we were so successful was because we had a goal, like one big goal that we wanted, and we all knew how to support each other and how to get there. And yeah, that's what I have. And also, if you have any questions that additionally to that, you can also just like DM my chapter organization or just have my email directly from Becky or Robin. Yeah.
That is a great offer, Zuhair. Zuhair is definitely serves on our student advisory committee and someone who's a great resource to other students who are considering launching. I'll also plug from the staff side, we're here for you. We have lots of great resources to start your chapter and to answer frequently asked questions and things that might come up. And we're seeing such creativity among chapters, kind of adapting to creating community virtually through their chapters. We're seeing that Active Minds chapters are such a valued resource, kind of, always and now, especially where there is an opportunity to connect with people digitally, and Michael, I'll call this, I'm hearing this conversation happen a lot in the mental health sphere, that the current term is social distancing. That's the thing that everybody's talking about right now. And it's important that we're social distancing, which is kind of the given term right now. So we don't want to kind of conflate that. But in the mental health sphere, we're starting to see a shift towards, let's stop calling it social distancing and rather look at physical distancing, because that's what we're doing. That's what we need. We need 6 feet of space. But when it comes to social connection, indeed, we need to be probably closing that gap as much as possible. So maintaining physical distance, but while also maintaining social connection is really critical. Perry, I'm going to toss one to you. We got a question, and I think this is a really interesting one. How can I tell or ask a friend to validate my feelings without being rude? Which I think is a really great question. Because sometimes it feels like my friend says that that it's not a big deal. So how can we ask for validation when we need it?
Right. And so what this might be, and this is hard because it's sort of this thing of like, if I ask you to hug me and you hug me, does that feel genuine, right? Like, do you really want to hug me, or just because I asked you? And so what it might mean is to have a sit-down conversation with your friend or with whoever you want to, and explain to them sort of what feels good for you and what your needs are. And this is outside, I would say, separate from like a situation where you're trying to tell them something. Like, make a separate conversation to have a separate conversation around, hey, I was thinking about our friendship, really care about you, and there's just I want to be a good friend to you, and here are some things, some ways that I've noticed that maybe that I need, and maybe you can help me with. And at first it'll feel weird to sort of like tell them that I need you to validate, I need to do these things, because now you're thinking in your head like, oh, are they validating just because I told them to? But that feeling will pass, and that can actually improve your friendship. Your friend can't read your mind. I'm a therapist, I can't read your mind either, but how do we have these genuine conversations? And again, this is outside of like when you're in need, sort of a separate conversation. How do we have these genuine conversations with others around what is going to actually enhance the friendship?
Yeah, excellent. Michael, I've got one for you that I'm curious to hear. We're getting a few questions in about, let's see if this actually kind of goes for everyone, but start with Michael here, about creating mental space kind of in you know, in a situation where suddenly we're in a lot of cases we're with people we love, but we're with them a lot more than we typically are, or, you know, that it's just such a shakeup of your routine. So how do we create mental space and self-care kind of when juggling all these other pieces? So Michael, yeah, what is your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can touch on for my wife. Obviously, she is more actively and constantly watching and taking care and playing with the kids. And so, one of the things that I've really been striving to do is when I can, when I do have a break in my schedule and I'm able to get away, I just take the kids for a walk. So we go down and we have a lot of paths, trails around my house, and just give her a half hour, an hour, where she can just compartmentalize and get out of her head and out of that constant parenting of and that she's used to. So that's one of the ways, and I think a lot of it is just if you recognize that in yourself, just making sure that you take that time to do that. Becky, you know, one of the things that we've been doing as our prevention and early intervention program partners is we're developing some of those resources. So we have Each Mind Matters, which is California's mental health movement, and on Each Mind Matters we have blog posts which talk about self-care during this time. So how do you eat healthy? I know I've had a few too many hot dogs, and since we've been just trying to find a way to eat healthy, eat fresh fruit in this time when you don't really have access to it necessarily as readily as you're used to. We have things for self-care and exercising. So taking opportunities, you know yourself best. So I would say whatever you need, just make sure to set that time to do that. So yeah, that's what I think. That's how I would say.
Yeah, and I appreciate you speaking up for kind of the other half of your partnership in this as well, who, who's also, even if this is their full-time, if this is your wife's full-time typical job, it's still different. It still looks different. It feels different. Daycare is not in the picture, or routines aren't in the picture. And so yeah, it's impacting everyone. I think about, I'm a full-time remote worker, so in some ways my life doesn't look dramatically different, but in other ways it so is. And so like the mental impact of this is very, very real and profound. Well, we have a lot of other great questions, and I wish we could answer all of them. Perry and Michael and Zuhair, I encourage you to kind of scroll through some of the Q&A. You've got some great compliments and things in there, so this is really, really appreciated. So I want to take a second to thank each of you for taking time to join us on this call and to offer your perspectives and experiences to the Active Minds audience. And to all of you out there, I want to really encourage you to tune in to Active Minds, activeminds.org, and activeminds.org /remote-resources, where is a evolving web page for us. For folks who are in California, Each Mind Matters is such a powerful resource and a tool that's constantly coming out with new stuff and just really fast response to what's going on. Before we have 1 minute left, any other like pressing pieces of advice or resources from our panelists that you'd want to put out there?
Be kind to yourselves and be kind to others.
Perfect. Excellent. Yeah.
And don't hog all the toilet paper.
Yes. We're all in it together. This is true.
We're all in it together. Yeah. Zuhair, any last comment?
I would just say, you know yourself best, and do what you need to do for yourself.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. Tune in, connect up with us, connect up with Active Minds, reach out, and we'll have a recording of this webinar posted in the next day or two on the Active Minds website. So thank you all, and have a good rest of your day. Take very good care of yourselves. Bye.